Hi everyone, Tim here. There's just a few days left before we land on Halloween this Saturday. And it seems like Halloween's going to look a lot different for most people this year. Due to restrictions, I know there's a lot of people out there that aren't going to be able to partake in their regular Halloween traditions like partying and dressing up and whatnot. And an excellent way to compensate for that is to watch an awesome horror movie. And fortunately for you, Paul and I are here with some recommendations. So these movies that I'm going to recommend aren't necessarily my favorites, but movies that I've just really enjoyed for one reason or another, and I'll explain that as I go on here. These aren't ranked in any particular order. I'm just going to kind of throw a bunch of movies at you, and hopefully one of them sticks. With my recommendations, I'm trying to avoid those most common recommended movies like Halloween, Friday the 13th, Exorcist, and stuff like that, because most people who are horror movie fans have already seen those. So I'm going to try and go with a few that maybe you may not have seen before, or maybe a few that I feel don't get enough attention. So let's start the list. The first one I'm going to recommend is 1990's Misery, directed by Rob Reiner, starring Kathy Bates and James Caan. James Caan plays an author, Paul Sheldon, best known for his book series titled Misery. He just finished writing the final book to the series, and he's about to take it to his publisher. And on his way there, he encounters a snowstorm and gets into a car accident. Now, at this point, I'm going to play a little clip from the movie.
You almost died. You have a compound fracture of the tibia in both legs, and the fibula in the right leg is fractured too. And as soon as the road's open, I'll take you to a hospital. In the meantime, you've got a lot of recovering to do.
There is nothing to worry about. You're gonna be just fine. I'm your #1 fan.
This movie really stands out to me because of Kathy Bates' performance. She actually won an Academy Award for her performance in this movie, and it's well deserved. She's very convincing, very scary, and to put yourself in Paul Sheldon's position, his vulnerable position, is even more terrifying. So, yeah, I recommend this movie. It's really not too violent, but it does have one very violent scene that would probably stick with you for a long time. So if you're cringy about that kind of stuff, then you might want to stay away from this. But overall, this is a really good movie. Even if you are cringy about that, I recommend you just watch it anyways. You'll definitely know when to close your eyes. Also, this movie was adapted from a Stephen King novel, so you know it's coming from a good source. My next choice is 1986 The Fly, directed by David Cronenberg, starring Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis. Jeff Goldblum plays a scientist who is just on the verge of discovering how to achieve teleportation.
There is a limit, even to the imagination.
Human teleportation, molecular decimation, breakdown, and reformation is inherently purging.
Where our greatest creations meet our deepest fears.
Something went wrong, Seth.
So I'll let you know right now that I'll watch Jeff Goldblum do anything, whether it's Independence Day or Jurassic Park. I just think the guy's cool and I like listening to him talk. And this movie is no exception to that. Jeff Goldblum is awesome in this, and so is Gina Davis. This movie stands out for me because of the awesome special effects. There is some transformation scenes in this movie that are just amazing, and it'll definitely creep you out. This movie is more unnerving than it is actually scary. It will make you feel uncomfortable and kind of creep you out. And if you've ever seen any of David Cronenberg's films before, you know that this is kind of just what he excels at. So yeah, if you like a little bit of sci-fi with your horror, then you should definitely go and check this one out. The next movie that I'm going to recommend is 2014's Creep, directed by Patrick Brice. And Patrick Brice is also pulling a triple duty here because him and Mark Duplass also wrote and starred in this movie. This one is about a young videographer who answers an online ad for a one-day job to record the last messages of a dying man in a remote town. As the movie progresses, the guy's behavior kind of gets more and more odd, which sort of makes you question his intentions a little bit. This is a found footage movie as we're watching everything that this man recorded for taking this job. Now, it's not quite as shaky and stuff as, say, the Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity, because there's really not a lot of running and chasing around. Maybe there might be some hiding here and there. But this, if you're susceptible to motion sickness, this one's a lot easier on you than, like, a lot of other movies. I was going to recommend another found footage movie called VHS. However, that one actually did give me motion sickness, and I got really sick during that movie. So, in good faith, I can't recommend that one. I would like to talk about this movie just a little bit more, but I don't really feel like there's much else I can say without giving away plot points or elements of the movie. So, I'm going to keep it short. In fact, I cannot stand having movies spoiled for me, so that's why I'm keeping most of these recommendations short. I can say, though, that because of the way this movie is filmed, you kind of feel like you're in the shoes of the videographer, like actually behind the camera holding it and watching this guy's behavior get more and more erratic. And that is actually a pretty good time. So that's why I'd recommend this movie. The next movie is 1997's Event Horizon, directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, starring Sam Neill and Lawrence Fishburne. Now, admittedly, I'm not a huge fan of Paul W.S. Anderson's films. He's most known for directing or producing all of the Resident Evil movies and those crappy Death Race movies. So, in my opinion, Event Horizon is the best movie that he's done. This is another combination of my two favorite genres, sci-fi and horror. And in 2047, a distress signal is received from the Event Horizon, a starship that disappeared during its maiden voyage to Proxima Centauri, which is the nearest star to the sun. This ship has been missing for 7 years at this point, so a group of rescuers go to find the ship, and once they board it, they quickly find out that something is very wrong with the Event Horizon. This movie really reminds me of Ridley Scott's Alien, the very, very first Alien movie in the Aliens franchise. However, and a very minor spoiler here, this movie has no aliens in it whatsoever. There's something completely different going on here, and I really enjoyed the reveal. The film doesn't hold a great score on IMDb or Rotten Tomatoes, but in my opinion, this movie is criminally underrated. Any person who likes sci-fi or horror movies should definitely watch this. My second to last recommendation is going to be 1999's Japanese horror movie called Audition, directed by Takashi Miike. Now, I had a hard enough time just trying to pronounce a director's name, so for the sake of not being disrespectful, I'm not going to attempt to try to pronounce the actors' names. However, I recognize 2 or 3 of the actors in this movie from other Asian films that have come out since Audition in 2000. This movie is about a middle-aged widower man who decides to start dating again, and he's aided by his friend who's a film producer, and they use auditions for a fake production to function as a dating service. After many hours of several auditions, he becomes very intrigued with one applicant in particular. She's a very withdrawn, shy, pretty young girl. He uses the audition process to strike up a relationship with the girl, however, she has no idea that none of this is real. While he's trying to keep up with the lie and maintain his relationship with this girl, he's gradually starting to notice signs that she's not actually quite as withdrawn as what she would lead you on to believe. I'm not going to say much more about the plot. This movie can kind of feel slow at times. It's a slow burner. The tension gradually increases, and by the time you get near the end, the tension is incredibly high. If you've never seen a Japanese horror movie before, this is definitely a great place to start. Now, considering how slow the movie goes and how sort of innocent the subject matter is, I mean, with exception to holding a fake audition and whatnot, the violence near the end might really surprise you. I think it's likely that most people are covering their eyes near the end of this movie. So you have your warning. I think any true horror fan is going to find this story fascinating. Okay, last but certainly not least, I recommend 2007's French horror film directed by Julien Maury and Alexandre Bustillo, Inside, starring Alison Paradis and Beatrice Daly. My apologies if anybody notices that I've mispronounced these names, but, I took a crack at it, so what can you do? Inside is an absolute roller coaster of a horror movie, and the violence is unrelenting. I feel somewhat obligated to give you a really stern warning about just how violent this movie is. About 8 years ago, a good friend of mine recommended that I watch this movie, and he kind of had the attitude like, oh yeah, you like horror movies? Well, you haven't seen anything yet. Check this out. And wow, was he ever right. I've only watched the movie once. Like, I haven't rewatched this movie since I viewed it for the first time. And I remember every single detail just because the movie stuck out to me that much. If the violence isn't enough, it's even more harrowing that the protagonist in this movie is a widowed pregnant woman very close to her due date, alone by herself in her home on Christmas Eve. So I guess this movie kind of works as a Christmas film also, but I don't recommend anybody watch this at Christmas time because it's probably not going to make you feel good. Her quiet night is interrupted when an ominous stranger comes knocking at her door. This isn't a supernatural movie. It's not a sci-fi movie like the other ones. This is just a straight up horror movie. So this movie is not for the faint of heart and highly recommended for the true horror fans out there. So that's the end of my recommendations. I hope that everybody has a happy and safe Halloween. Take care.